When this stray dog is encouraged by the staff of a shelter to meet a strange woman, his lack of reaction breaks her heart. But when the dog finally recognizes the woman, his eyes fill with tears, and the onlookers can't help but cry as well. In the muted light of the shelter, Katrina's eyes locked onto the emaciated figure of a large dog with hauntingly familiar blue eyes. The moment was frozen in time. Was it possible that Lord, the dog she'd lost, now stood before her? The dog's coat was mangy and his body was emaciated. His ribs showed and his skin had scabs where the hair had fallen out. If this was Lord, he was a shadow of his former self. Katrina searched for a glimmer of recognition in those deep blue eyes, but it wasn't there. Lord's gaze was clouded. His eyes held no flicker of memory. Katrina's heart began to sink. "It will take him a while to recover," the vet at the shelter said. "We have him under heavy sedation at the moment. This dog has been through a lot." The joy that had surged through Katrina's veins was now laced with a piercing uncertainty. Could this truly be her Lord? Could this be the dog she'd cradled as a puppy, the companion who'd been her shadow through countless days and nights? Tears brimmed in her eyes. It was not just from the possibility that this was her beloved Lord. It was from the fear that the bond they once shared might be lost forever. Her hand trembled as she extended it towards the dog. A silent plea for recognition escaped her lips. At that moment, the years of searching, of hoping against hope, weighed heavily on her heart. Was this reunion the end of her search, or just another twist in the tortuous path fate had laid out for them? 5 years earlier, a young Katrina beamed as she cradled a small, blue-eyed puppy in her arms. Lord, with his boundless energy and piercing gaze, quickly became more than a pet. He was her soulmate. Their days were filled with laughter, and their nights full of companionship and contented sighs. Each morning, Lord's excited barks were Katrina's alarm, and each night, his calm breathing was her lullaby. They were inseparable, a duo facing the world with unspoken understanding and love. Katrina had lost her husband a year earlier, and Lord's company was saving her life. But that harmony shattered on an autumn day in 2017. Katrina returned home to find her backyard eerily quiet. The gate was ajar, and Lord was gone. Panic gripped her heart as she called out his name. She hoped for the familiar sound of his paws, but there was only silence. The following days turned into weeks, then months. Katrina's search grew more desperate. She posted flyers on every street corner and shared social media pleas across the internet. Yet, there was no sign of Lord. Her home felt hollow. Each corner echoed with the absence of her beloved companion, and her loneliness was more acute than ever before. As hope dwindled, Katrina was overwhelmed by a heartbreak that seemed endless. The void Lord left was more than just a missing presence. It was as if a part of her soul had been ripped away. Nights were the hardest. Each tick of the clock reminded her of the loss, and her heart ached for the return of her faithful friend. For Lord, the world had become a treacherous place. The streets were unkind to a dog used to the warmth of a human home. Each day was a battle for survival. He scrounged for scraps, dodged cars, and fled from hostile strays. The cold nights were especially cruel. Every night, he curled up in deserted alleys and longed for the soft bed and gentle strokes he once knew. His once glossy coat turned dull and matted. His eyes, once bright with mischief, now mirrored the harshness of his reality on the streets. People were once sources of affection, but now they either shooed him away or ignored his plight. The harshness of the world had not just marred his body, but had begun to dim the light in his soul. Salvation was quick and unexpected. A group of volunteers from a local animal shelter found him. Their gentle voices and careful touches were foreign yet comforting. Lord was weakened and weary, but allowed himself to be led into their vehicle. At the shelter, he was greeted with warm blankets and a bowl of food. Volunteers tended to his matted fur and soothed his wounded and scabbed skin. In their eyes, he saw not pity, but hope. His very soul was exhausted, but he had a glimmer of a chance at life again. Despite his frail body and wary gaze, there was a resilience in him, perhaps even a faint echo of the spirited dog he once was. Now, back at the shelter, the air was thick with unspoken questions and high hopes. Katrina had seen the dog's picture on the shelter's social media page and had been stunned by his similarity to the puppy she had lost 2 years earlier. She had rushed to the shelter, and now she stood before Lord. Her emotions were a maelstrom of joy and doubt. Lord's indifferent gaze was a stark contrast to the warm, loving looks he used to give her. There was no wagging tail, no joyful bark, no recognition in those once familiar blue eyes. It was as if he was looking through her, at a stranger, not the person who had shared her life and home. The volunteers watched with bated breath. Everyone hoped for a miraculous connection. But as minutes passed, they lost optimism. Katrina's mind raced. The ravages of street life could change a dog, but could it erase the bond they once shared? Her heart ached with the possibility that this dog might not be her beloved companion, and she left the shelter in tears. But Katrina wasn't ready to give up. If this dog was Lord, he had seen hardships beyond what she could conceive. He had every right to be scared and wary. Her only hope was understanding. So, with renewed conviction, the following day she returned to the shelter. Now, she wasn't just looking at a dog that resembled Lord. She was looking at an old friend who had shared a part of her life, a friend who had left an indelible mark on her heart. This time, she carried with her a tangible piece of their shared past. As she approached Lord, her steps were tentative, but her spirit was buoyant. As soon as she reached Lord's kennel, she knelt down. Her eyes were level with his, and she whispered a phrase that had been their unique bond. "Good boy, Lord, good boy." Something shifted in Lord's demeanor. His ears perked up. His eyes flickered with a spark of recognition. It was as if the mists of time and hardship were clearing. Slowly, hesitantly, Lord moved closer to Katrina. He sniffed her hand, and then, with a soft whine that spoke volumes, he nuzzled into her palm. It was a gesture so characteristic of the Lord she knew, a gesture filled with trust and love. Tears streamed down Katrina's cheeks as she wrapped her arms around Lord. The dog she had mourned, searched for, and found again was finally in her arms. The shelter erupted into soft cheers and claps. The staff had just witnessed a reunion that they had only dared to hope for. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, a display of the unbreakable bond between a human and their pet. This love had weathered the cruelest storms and emerged stronger. Then, when she looked at Lord, tears were flowing from those piercing blue eyes too. Back home, the world gradually took on a familiar shape for Lord. Each day marked a small victory, a step towards reclaiming the life he had lost. The comfort of his old bed, the familiar trails in the park, and most importantly, the constant presence of Katrina healed him in ways that went beyond the physical. With each passing day, his tail wagged more, his eyes brightened, and the echoes of his playful bark filled the house once again. Katrina watched this transformation and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her home had been shrouded in silence and longing for such a long time, but now it was alive again with the spirit of their reunited bond. In the years to come, Katrina would often find herself gazing at Lord and musing on the incredible journey they had shared. Their story was a blend of loss, perseverance, and reunion. It was a bond that had survived the harshest trials, a bond that had been lost but was found again, stronger and more precious than ever. It was a bond that spoke of love, resilience, and the miraculous ways in which life can unfold when hope refuses to dim. What a beautiful ending! Have you ever lost a pet? How would you feel during a reunion like this? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.